The Sigma male is a truly rare breed of man-am enigmatic figure who refuses to conform to the traditional alpha-beta hierarchy that governs social structures. Unlike the alpha male, who thrives on dominance and leadership, or the beta male, who finds comfort in following, the Sigma male exists outside this social framework entirely. He is a lone wolf, a man who carves his own path, guided by a deep sense of self-reliance, independence, and personal philosophy rather than external validation. His solitary nature is not born out of weakness but rather an intentional choice or rejection of societal norms that demand conformity. He neither seeks approval nor desires to control others. Instead, he values freedom above all else, preferring to operate in the background, mastering his own destiny without interference. This level of independence allows him to focus on his goals without distractions, granting him an unparalleled sense of autonomy and control over his life. However, while this path offers immense personal growth and self-sufficiency, it also comes with a cost. Over time, the Sigma male's emotional detachment grows, and the warmth that once allowed him to form connections with others begins to fade. The very traits that make him strong and self-sufficient, his ability to remain unaffected by social pressures, his resistance to manipulation, and his refusal to engage in shallow relationships can ultimately lead to emotional isolation. Many Sigma males find themselves becoming colder, more distant, and seemingly unapproachable, not because they intend to, but because of the experiences and realizations they accumulate throughout life. But what exactly causes a Sigma male to grow cold over time? What experiences shape his emotional detachment? And how does his perspective on the world push him further into solitude? In this video, I'll be breaking down 10 key reasons why Sigma males slowly become cold-hearted, exploring the psychological shifts, betrayals, and life lessons that harden them over time. Whether you are a Sigma male yourself or simply want to understand these mysterious lone wolves, stay tuned, because we're about to dive deep into the Sigma mindset. Number 1. They struggle with shallow social norms. Society thrives on predictable, surface-level social interactions, things like forced small talk, casual networking events, social media validation, and mindless group activities. These rituals serve a purpose for most people. They create a sense of belonging, maintain social harmony, and allow people to connect without deep effort. But for a Sigma male, these interactions often feel hollow and pointless. He struggles with the idea of exchanging pleasantries just for the sake of it. He sees through the fake smiles, empty conversations, and scripted interactions that dominate social life. While others find comfort in blending into a crowd, the Sigma male finds it exhausting. To him, these norms feel like a distraction from meaningful pursuits, a waste of energy on things that add no real value to his life. At first, he might attempt to fit in out of courtesy, attending social events, participating in group conversations, or even making an effort to engage in small talk. But over time, his patience wears thin. Every time he forces himself to conform, he feels a little more disconnected, a little more frustrated, a little more alienated. Eventually, he stops trying altogether. He begins turning down invitations, avoiding unnecessary social interactions, and preferring his own company over meaningless engagement. To others, this withdrawal may seem like arrogance, rudeness, or even misanthropy, but for the Sigma, it's simply self-preservation. The more he avoids shallow social norms, the colder and more distant he appears, not because he despises people, but because he refuses to engage in relationships that lack depth, authenticity, and purpose. Number 2. They realize the world fails to meet their standards. In his younger years, a Sigma male might hold on to the hope that he can find like-minded individuals, people who share his values, intelligence, and depth. He may seek out friendships, romantic relationships, or professional circles where he expects intellectual stimulation, integrity, and a shared vision of excellence. However, as he gains more life experience, a harsh reality sets in. Most people operate on mediocrity, convenience, and pretense rather than genuine depth or excellence. In the workplace, he sees coworkers cutting corners or engaging in office politics instead of focusing on results. In friendships, he encounters superficiality and self-interest, where loyalty often takes a backseat to convenience. Even within family dynamics, he may notice hypocrisy and contradictions, where people preach values they don't actually follow. Each disappointment reinforces a painful realization the world is not built for men like him. Where most people learn to tolerate this and compromise their expectations, the Sigma male refuses to lower his standards. Instead, he mentally catalogs each failure, each letdown, each broken expectation, building a silent but firm detachment from society. Rather than waste time trying to change a world that resists transformation, he chooses to step away. He becomes colder not out of arrogance, but out of disillusionment, a firm conviction that he is better off alone than surrounded by people who will never meet his standards. Number 3. They bear hidden scars from past betrayals. Unlike others who freely trust and expect betrayals as a natural part of life, a Sigma male is highly selective with the people he lets into his inner world. When he chooses to trust, it is not a casual decision, it is a calculated risk. He carefully observes people before opening up, ensuring that they have proven their loyalty, intelligence, and alignment with his values. However, when someone betrays that trust, the impact is far greater than it would be for the average person. Because Sigma males are emotionally reserved, they do not build dozens of shallow connections. Instead, they form a few deeply meaningful bonds, and when these bonds break, whether through disloyalty, deceit, or abandonment, it shakes them to their core. This kind of emotional wound doesn't heal easily. Instead of outwardly reacting, the Sigma buries the pain, turning it into a lesson. People are not to be trusted. Each betrayal hardens his exterior, making him even less willing to trust, less inclined to open up, and more convinced that emotional detachment is the only way to protect himself. Over time, he becomes cold-hearted not because he wants to be, but because experience has taught him that closeness is a liability. The fewer attachments he forms, the less likely he is to be hurt. Unfortunately, this can lead to missed opportunities for genuine connection, as his defenses block out even those who might have been different. Number 4. They analyze and reject emotional outbursts. A Sigma male doesn't just experience emotions, he dissects them, scrutinizes them, and ultimately rejects any that appear irrational or excessive. He has observed how emotions, when displayed in public, can be weaponized. A coworker faking distress to avoid accountability. A friend using guilt to manipulate a situation. A romantic partner using tears or anger to control a conversation. From an early age, the Sigma learns that public emotional displays are often tools of manipulation or signs of weakness. Instead of engaging in the same behavior, he commits to absolute emotional control. No matter the situation, whether it's an argument, a personal loss, or an extreme challenge, he trains himself to remain unshaken, composed, and indifferent on the surface. This level of emotional self-discipline serves as a powerful shield, ensuring that no one can ever use his feelings against him. However, it also comes with a cost. He denies himself the catharsis of emotional release. Even in moments of personal grief, he suppresses his pain instead of expressing it. He distances himself from emotional connections. When someone close to him cries, vents, or expresses deep emotion, he struggles to reciprocate, seeing it as unnecessary or even manipulative. He appears robotic or uncaring. To others, his lack of emotional response can make him seem cold, detached, or even heartless, even when he does care on some level. Over time, this emotional suppression becomes a habit, and the habit turns into a defining trait. While he may see it as a strength, proof of his mastery over himself, others see it as a barrier that makes him unreachable, unreadable, and ultimately isolated. Number 5. They push themselves to master every weakness. Sigma males place an extreme level of importance on self-sufficiency. To them, relying on others is not just an inconvenience, it's a vulnerability. If they discover a weakness in themselves, whether it's a lack of technical skills, physical endurance, financial independence, or even emotional susceptibility, they treat it like an urgent problem to solve. When it comes to practical skills, a Sigma male will train relentlessly. If he lacks knowledge in a subject, he will dive deep into books, research, and hands-on experience until he masters it. If he is physically unfit, he will push his body to its limits until it is no longer a weakness. But the same philosophy applies to emotional weakness. If he once let himself be emotionally vulnerable and it led to betrayal, embarrassment, or regret, he will lock that part of himself away. If he feels his emotions cloud his judgment, he will discipline himself until he functions purely on logic. At first, this level of self-mastery makes him highly competent, confident, and independent. But over time, it has a side effect: emotional rigidity. He becomes ruthless with himself, refusing to accept any form of vulnerability. Compassion both for himself and others starts to feel like an unnecessary indulgence. Instead of seeing emotional moments as a normal part of life, he views them as flaws that need to be eliminated. This relentless pursuit of perfection makes him increasingly cold, detached, and unwilling to acknowledge his own need for human connection. Number 6. They shoulder people's problems until they burn out. Despite his reputation for independence, a Sigma male often finds himself unintentionally taking on the burdens of others. Whether it's helping a colleague troubleshoot a complex issue, offering deep advice to a struggling friend, or silently absorbing the emotional weight of those around him, he tends to be the person people turn to when they need guidance, stability, or problem-solving. At first, he obliges not out of a desire for approval, but because he values efficiency and dislikes seeing unresolved issues. He approaches problems with logic, patience, and a steady demeanor, making him an ideal confidant in both personal and professional settings. However, this dynamic quickly becomes one-sided. Friends and colleagues begin relying on him as their emotional crutch, expecting him to listen, solve, and advise without reciprocation. He rarely expresses his own struggles, leading people to assume he has none, reinforcing the cycle where he gives but never receives support. He becomes a fixer in relationships, unintentionally attracting those who need saving rather than equal partnerships. Over time, this unbalanced dynamic wears him down. He realizes that while he is shouldering everyone else's problems, no one is stepping up to support him. This leads to quiet exhaustion, suppressed resentment, and ultimately, a hardened outlook on human relationships. Instead of confronting others about this imbalance, he withdraws further. He stops offering help as freely, grows colder in his interactions, and begins to assume that people only seek him out when they need something. This fuels his growing detachment, making him even more selective about whom he allows into his life. At his core, the Sigma male values genuine, mutual relationships, but repeated experiences of feeling used and unappreciated teach him to build emotional walls. The kindness he once showed becomes cynicism, and his willingness to help transforms into a calculated decision rather than an instinctive act of goodwill. Number 7. They reject partial love or shallow bonds. Sigma males have a reputation for being incredibly selective when it comes to relationships. Unlike many people who are willing to settle for companionship over solitude, Sigmas refuse to engage in half-hearted relationships. To them, a relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, must offer depth, value, and mutual respect. If it doesn't, it's not worth their time. This means they quickly cut ties when they sense a connection is emotionally draining, needy, clingy, or overly dependent partners. Disrespectful, manipulative, controlling, or dishonest behavior. Intellectually unfulfilling, lack of depth, curiosity, or stimulating conversation. Driven by superficial attraction rather than meaningful compatibility. At first glance, this might seem like a rational approach. After all, why waste time on relationships that don't meet one's standards? However, this uncompromising approach also has its drawbacks. They struggle with the natural ups and downs of relationships. Instead of working through misunderstandings, conflicts, or emotional growth, they often choose to walk away rather than navigate the complexities of human connection. They become emotionally distant, even when they do care. Their fear of wasting time on shallow relationships makes them hesitant to express affection, appreciation, or vulnerability. They isolate themselves more than necessary. By rejecting partial love, they sometimes reject potentially meaningful connections that could have grown into something deeper with time and effort. To the outside world, this uncompromising nature makes the Sigma male seem cold-hearted, emotionally unavailable, and even incapable of love. In reality, He is simply unwilling to engage in relationships that don't meet his internal standards. But in doing so, he often ends up alone, not because he has to be, but because he chooses to be. Number 8. They dismiss shallow praise and vanity. The Sigma male is not motivated by external validation. Where many people seek praise, awards, and recognition as a means of feeling valued, he sees these as empty social rituals that contribute nothing to his actual growth or success. This indifference to praise often begins in childhood or early adulthood, when he realizes that people often give compliments out of politeness rather than genuine appreciation. Many awards and titles are more about social status than true achievement. Public recognition often comes with hidden agendas, such as manipulation or expectations for future favors. Because of this, he develops a strong distaste for vanity and superficial applause. When people congratulate him on minor accomplishments, throw celebratory events, or offer excessive compliments, he remains unmoved. To him, real success does not require external acknowledgement. It is a private, internal victory. His rejection of shallow praise manifests in several ways. He avoids social gatherings centered around recognition, such as workplace awards, birthdays, or ceremonies. He brushes off compliments with a neutral response, neither basking in them nor seeking more. He values constructive criticism far more than empty praise, preferring feedback that helps him improve rather than words that stroke his ego. This mindset creates an increasing disconnect between him and the social world. Where most people bond over mutual recognition, shared accomplishments, and collective celebrations, he finds these things meaningless and exhausting. Over time, his indifference to shallow validation makes him seem aloof, distant, and even arrogant to those who don't understand his perspective. To him, growth, knowledge, and mastery are the only true rewards. He does not need an audience to affirm his worth. His own self-discipline and progress are enough. However, this intense self-reliance can sometimes backfire. While he sees himself as simply cutting through vanity, others perceive him as cold, unappreciative, or emotionally detached. In reality, his rejection of shallow praise is not about disrespect or arrogance. It is about authenticity. He would rather remain unseen and truly improve himself than bask in attention for achievements he considers insignificant. But in doing so, he further separates himself from conventional social circles, reinforcing his status as an outsider, respected, but rarely understood. Number 9. They embrace a harsh moral code over forgiveness. Sigmas rarely trumpet their moral stances, but they do maintain a personal code that leans harsh and unbending. If someone crosses certain ethical or loyalty lines, they see no reason to forgive. They prefer to cut them off entirely. While society often promotes second chances and tolerance, the Sigma believes that bending such rules weakens his resolve. This unyielding approach can appear unforgiving. Some might call it merciless. To him, it's consistency. Bending once signals that his moral boundaries are an absolute. Over time, carrying this rigid code can desensitize him, hardening his heart against the pleas or regrets of others and reinforcing the cold image he projects. For Sigma males, the journey toward becoming cold-hearted isn't just a phase. It's the outcome of their relentless independence, minimal tolerance for shallow bonds, and a survival strategy that discards anything that jeopardizes their self-reliance. From shunning half-formed relationships to cultivating an unbreakable moral line, they inch further from the warmth that most people see. RAV. Number 10. They consciously limit themselves from emotional bonds. For most people, emotional connections are a source of warmth, security, and meaning. But for the Sigma male, they are a potential liability. He has learned either through personal experiences or careful observation that letting people too close can lead to manipulation, disappointment, or vulnerability. Rather than passively accepting emotional closeness as part of life, he actively limits his emotional availability. This is not an unconscious defense mechanism. It is a deliberate choice, rooted in a belief that deep connections often come at a cost he is unwilling to pay. His emotional detachment manifests in several ways. He keeps conversations surface level, rarely sharing his past, his fears, or his deepest thoughts. He avoids situations that could foster emotional intimacy, such as heart-to-heart discussions, group bonding activities, or sentimental gestures. In romantic relationships, he maintains a certain level of distance, ensuring that no one has full access to his emotions. The irony of this mindset is that it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. By limiting emotional connections, he reinforces the idea that meaningful bonds are rare or non-existent. By avoiding vulnerability, he prevents himself from experiencing relationships that could prove his fears wrong. The more he isolates, the more he convinces himself that emotional closeness is not worth the risk. This calculated withdrawal from emotional intimacy deepens his solitude. While he may tell himself he is simply avoiding unnecessary drama or emotional complications, the reality is that he is also depriving himself of the kind of connections that bring fulfillment and meaning to life. His coldness is not born from apathy, it is the armor he wears to protect himself from a world that, in his experience, has too often let him down. Final thoughts. The Sigma male's coldness is not a random personality trait, it is a carefully crafted response to a world that has repeatedly shown him the limitations of human connection. Whether through one-sided emotional labor, self-imposed isolation, or a rejection of shallow validation, he gradually builds a mental fortress that shields him from manipulation, disappointment, and superficiality. However, this same fortress also limits his ability to experience the full depth of human connection. While his independence and self-sufficiency make him powerful, they also make him a lone figure in a world where most people thrive on relationships and recognition. Ultimately, the Sigma male walks a fine line between strength and solitude, choosing to embrace the cold not because he wants to but because, in his experience, it is the only way to remain untouchable. If you found this video insightful or relatable, why not join our growing community? Subscribe to the channel for more content exploring the mindsets, traits, and behaviors of Sigma males. Your engagement helps us dive deeper into these unique perspectives. Be sure to like this video if it resonated with you, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Remember, as a Sigma male or someone inspired by their path, staying true to yourself is the ultimate strength. Keep evolving, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next video.